Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 U.S. Open Data Dive Show. We have a lot to get into. Looking forward to digging into some very intense data to try and figure out who we want to wager and use in our DFS lineups. So I don't want to waste any time. Let's get straight into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is simply the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler and a much better DFS player. Go check them out. It is simply well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to a lot of social media. This is my Twitter and Instagram, where I posted research earlier this evening around the past 11 winners of the U.S. Open. So if you would like to see the summary of that research and the players who qualify under the pattern from the previous 11 winners, give me a follow over at social media. Twitter is also where I place my betting card every week for the PGA Tour. That will be no different for the U.S. Open. That'll come out Wednesday evening after the DFS Tactics show. And I certainly fired off a lot of wagers already this morning, and probably am not done yet. I do like several of the odds that were out there. So if you want to see my betting card every week, give me a follow over at Twitter. And Twitter is also where I post my baseball content. I say daily, 3 up, 3 down. It's quickly becoming about 4 or 5 days a week, including not today, as was pretty busy today doing a lot of the research around the U.S. Open. Probably won't be able to continue to do so on Sundays, but generally speaking, if you want to see some quick hitting baseball content generally through the middle of the week, give me a follow over at Twitter. And then Gabe's Twitter is also in the description. Consider giving him a follow and subscribing to his article, The Fringe. It is a very good read. We've been collaborating pretty closely for the past couple of months, and I don't think it's a coincidence that I'm starting to get on a little bit of a run here, building some momentum. He's had a lot of success with two analytic minds working together. We don't always agree, but two analytic minds working towards the common goal of building the best lineups and having the best wagers. So consider giving Gabe a follow. His article is a very good read, and it's a good way to start your week. And then finally, for this intro, we are live. Chat is open. Love to hear from you all. Had quite a bit of interaction last night around the Canadian Open. Everybody seemed to do pretty well, so I'm happy to hear about that from the community standpoint. And then moving into the U.S. Open, who are we focused on early on this week? What statistics do you think are going to be most at play for LA Country Club? All of that good stuff. So let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2023 U.S. Open. And we're going to start, as we always do, over on a Monday evening at Windfinder. And I don't see much wind in the forecast right now. Of course, that can obviously change in the next couple of days, but as of right now, a fantastic week for golf. In the forecast, no severe winds or anything like that. Might be a little bit of wind on Monday, and that can maybe creep into the championship round, but we're looking at highs in the low 70s, not a lot of wind, just a great week and weekend for golf, and the LA Country Club staff, agronomy staff, will be able to set up the course the way they want to. So there's a quick look at the forecast again with no wind in there. We're not going to spend too much time on it. So let's go ahead and move on over to Fantasy National. And we're not going to spend too much time here either. We're going to start in Microsoft Excel, generally speaking, as we did with the PGA Championship, and then move to Fantasy National to see how or who we want to focus on these various statistics that we think are going to play this week for the U.S. Open. But here is a look at the DK prices. Not going to fight it this week. The prices have been out for a little while now. So Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, both 11,000. Brooks, Cantley, Hovland in the 10Ks, all that stuff. And then here is your top total performers from 2023. Like I said, not going to do too much here just yet. So we're going to go to Microsoft Excel. First thing we're going to do, let's do a quick review of the scorecard and estimated yardages for this year's U.S. Open. The yardages are taken directly from the U.S. Open website. You see that we have 5 par 3s and 3 par 5s. So this is a par 70, a different style of layout. 2 par 3s and 3 par 3s and 2 par 5s on the front 9, 2 par 3s and 1 par 5 on the back 9. But the biggest thing to notice here for LA Country Club, we have 3 very long par 3s this week. The shortest in this range is 228. That is, I can't say common, but if a course does have a long par 3 that measures over 225, it'll generally be in that 230, 235 range. So that's not necessarily all that ridiculous or whatnot. But the other 2 par 3s in this range, 284 and 290 yards. So very, very long par 3s. And that is something that I think will be a decent little talking point this week. Now, as I understand it, they do play downhill. So the true yardage might not be the playable yardage, but still very, very long par 3s. And that's why we looked at it a little bit last night. We see the par 4s. We do have a drivable par 4 here at LA Country Club. Measures to 330. It is protected by a barranca. Barranca, I think is how I don't know how you say it, to be honest. But it's protected with that and a lot of sand and slope and whatnot. But it is a risk reward par 4, a short par 4, then 2 from 400 to 450, 3 each from 450 to 5 and 500 plus. And then the 3 par 5s are evenly split in the range buckets from 500 to 650, 1 in each of the 3. So there's a quick look at the scorecard. We talked quite a bit about it last night. And then the estimated proximity, this is per Pro Visualizer. And as a reminder, Pro Visualizer always sets up par 5s as true 3-shot holes, and the drivable par 4 is also set up as a layup. So 2 of these 4 very short approaches and the drivable par 4 are in here. So if you think the professionals this week are going to go after the green and 2 on 2 of the 3 par 5s and are going to try and drive the green on the drivable par 4, then you might want to move these or 3 of these 4 over into the 200 plus. But one of the par 5s, the one on the back 9 playing 623 yards, is seemingly a legitimate par 3 or a legitimate 3-shot par 5. It'll demand a 100 to 125 approach. But this is the U.S. Open. It is long. It is difficult. The majority of approach shots, I imagine, are going to be coming from 175 to 200. I don't think I'm going to do too much with proximity. We'll go into some deeper statistical dive a little bit later around previous U.S. Opens. But if you are curious or thinking about proximity, this is the estimated proximity chart per Pro Visualizer. I would move probably 2 of these 75 to 100s into the 200 plus, but myself, I'm not going to be doing much with proximity, but wanted to provide that info for you all. So there's a look again at the estimated proximity and the whole yardages per the U.S. Open website. I will keep that up over in the background or whatnot. I'm going to bring up the U.S. Open file that I have. This is the same as the early look. We did this for the PGA Championship as well. And what I did for the PGA Championship, and I'll have it up over here to the side. So if you see me looking over this way, I've got my comparison course chart that we normally look at weekly on the PGA Tour for returning or consistent courses. That way we can get a gauge of how these numbers compare to usual courses or consistent courses on the PGA Tour. That's the word I'm looking for. So, as I mentioned last night, I'm not going to do a whole lot this week surrounding previous metrics from the U.S. Opens. Whereas the PGA Championship was consistent, we had the metrics for those. You see, some of the U.S. Opens we don't. For example, we don't have any strokes gained data from last year's U.S. Open. We don't have any driving and green statistics. In fact, the only strokes gained we have are 3 years from 2021 to 2019. So take these with a little bit of some skepticism, but I do think it will provide at least a foundation or give you the bare minimum idea of what generally plays well at a U.S. Open. And you can see, except for last year, we do have driving and greens. We have a lot of the scoring metrics and whatnot. So let's go through this here a little bit. We can see that off the tee is the lowest of the 4 strokes gained for the 3 years that we have data, and that surprises me, especially if you are or if you have checked out the research that I did earlier today and posted it on social media. There's quite a bit of pattern from the winners regarding off the tee, but this off the tee number is pretty darn low. It's in fact it is lower than the average full field course. I don't know if I truly believe that. This is a pretty darn low number from Torrey Pines a couple of years ago. And of course we don't have anything from last year, but I would have to think that off the tee is going to be a little bit more important than what this is showing. Approach 3.28 is pretty darn high. Now PGA was a little bit higher if I remember correctly, but 3.28 here, that's a very, very high number. We're looking at the 3M is the exact same average or total, and the 3M is 31% more important. I do believe the PGA was about 50%, but approach, and then this is why I advocate every week that I truly believe strokes gained approach is the most important shot type in golf. It's why I prefer these players, generally speaking. It's just very, very important, especially when conditions get difficult, and the best of the players or the best players in the world rise to the top in these very difficult tournaments, these majors. So a very high number here in strokes gained approach, about 30% higher than the average full field course. Around the green is going to be the highest in terms of percentage. However, this is more than double the average full field course in terms of around the green. The closest full field course that comes to this number is the Memorial. And you know how much emphasis we put on around the green at the Memorial a couple weeks ago. The average on the PGA Tour, or average course value for around the green, is 0.99. This is doubling that. Around the green is going to be a significant portion of who has success here at U.S. Open, or at the U.S. Open, these greens generally are pretty hard to hit. They're very fast. The rough is long. So if players aren't in the fairway, they're probably not going to be hitting the green. Around the green is going to be a pretty big factor. And then putting is actually a pretty big deal as well. Again, just looking, the closest number looks to be the John Deere, which is 100th less than this 2.72. The John Deere is 14% more important than the average full field course. So you've got basically 100% here and around the green, 30% in approach, 14 to 15% in putting. Off the tee, at least by these 3 years, is less, is negative in value. Don't know if I really truly believe that, but just the emphasis and around the green this week, iron play. We're going to be looking at some fast and lightning bent greens, Memorial, Masters, John Deere to a little bit lesser of an extent. They are always fast bent, but if I had to guess, these are going to be lightning. So I'm still debating with myself if I want to look at just lightning bent greens. But there's a look at the strokes gained for the 3 years that we have data. Moving into driving statistics, a little bit interesting. The driving distance slightly higher than the full field course average. Nothing too drastic, but that can be attributable to course. You see Torrey Pines, Winged Foot, very, very important. Torrey Pines was pretty important. Somewhere like Pebble Beach and Shinnecock Hills, it wasn't. So I'm not sure how I feel about driving distance, to be honest. I think it's going to play a little bit of a factor, but I think fairways are going to be the more important thing this week, considering how long this rough is. This is a fairly high number. This is above full field course average, but once again, just like we looked at the PGA, this greens in regulation number is astoundingly high. The average on the PGA Tour is a 3.12, 3.73. Looks like the Barbasol is pretty close in comparison. The Mexico Open is pretty darn close in comparison. So the Mexico Open, in terms of greens in regulation, was 18% more important. So big factor here for this U.S. Open. So we're going to be looking at greens when it's long, when it's difficult. I really do think fairways is going to be a pretty big deal this week. Not convinced on distance, although I could go either way with that. Moving into scoring, it's pretty clear, and it was pretty clear for the PGA Championship as well. It's all about bogey avoidance. Pars are great scores at U.S. Opens. I would not be surprised to see maybe 3 or 4 players under par by the end of competition Sunday. Pars are great scores, meaning bogey avoidance is going to be everything that we want to look at this week. You can see eagles gained is minimal. Birdies is a very small number by comparison. The average on the PGA Tour is over 3. This is under 2.5. But it's all about the bogey avoidance, and doubles might be something as well, considering this is double the number of the average full field course, just like around the green. So double bogey avoidance honestly might be something we want to look at as well. We'll definitely do some of that tonight. Not sure if I'm going to have it in the final mixed condition model, but this is a very large number here in terms of double bogey avoidance. Good evening, Bruce. Thanks for jumping in chat. More distance equals less stress overall, which I think will pay off here. I mean, you could be right. Absolutely. And it when I hear distance, I hear less fairways as well, which I should get out of that mindset. You could be right, absolutely. I don't know how much off the tee is going to play, though. I really don't, because around the green, this number is just so very high. This rough is going to be very, very thick, very hard to play out of. Of course, iron play is always going to be a focal point for U.S. Opens. We only have so much percentage in off the tee, or for our mixed condition model. I do think fairways are going to be some bit of importance. I mean, other than 2021's at Torrey Pines, you can see most of these fairways gained numbers are fairly large. I mean, there's a 3.0, 1.5. Do you have a 0.7, 2.25? So I have a feeling fairways might be something that way players can control the spin on their approach shots. If anything, I'm leaning fairways over driving distance, but I still think it's going to be more greens in regulation and around the green. But yeah, your input, it could very well play out that way. I heard fairways were going to be easier to hit here, but who knows? See, I've heard the opposite. I've heard that there's some terrain here that you really have to shape your shot. If the fairway leans left or right, if you hit a left or right shot, there's no way to stay in the fairway. But you're right. It's all conjecture until we see how it plays out. And that's why I'm not too terribly confident in much in this tab, other than greens. I do feel very confident greens are going to be a pretty big factor. Again, my lean is right now fairways gained, but I could be talked out of that. But moving back into the scoring, I mean, again, pars being great scores, not even good scores, great scores at the U.S. Open. We're going to be looking at bogey avoidance and double bogey avoidance. I don't know if I'm going to have double bogey avoidance in the mixed condition model, but we're definitely going to be looking at both of these tonight for the players in the field this week. Not a whole lot to do with par 3s, 4s, and 5s, since every course is set up differently. Again, the main takeaway, this is an astronomically high number compared to the rest of the consistent courses on the PGA Tour. The average for the PGA Tour in par 4s is about a 4.4. So this is 40% higher. No other course has anything close to a 5.5. The highest is a 5.3 at Wells Fargo is the highest consistent course. That's the highest. And you see, this is the average of the U.S. Opens. We had almost a 7.0 at Winged Foot. I mean, just par 4s are going to be such an important factor. Again, I'm not going to do too much with lengths, I don't think. Although, generally speaking, you see it's generally the longer par 4s that matter the most. But, again, just a heavy emphasis on par 4s. They are very, very, very important. Par 5s, 1.4 is actually less than the average full field course. I'm sure I'm going to have some par 5 metrics in here, but I'm definitely not going to be looking at any particular range. Right now I'm just leaning kind of 5% in par 5s. I just don't see them playing all that key this week. There are 3 of them, but it's still only a par 70 because we have 5 par 3s. So I think I'm going to be leaning more par 3s than I am par 5s, but the par 4s are going to take the biggest emphasis. And then finally, we'll take a look at proximity, but again, reminder, we don't have the stats for all the years. So I don't want to spend too much time or too much effort into it, considering its incomplete set of data. But the outliers here in terms of the high numbers. This 150 to 175 number is humongous. It's almost triple the importance. A lot of that's probably coming from, I think this is Pebble. No, Shinnecock Hills. Interesting. Okay. So 150 to 175 garnering a lot in terms of proximity. And then, as you would probably expect, 200 plus, this is almost double the number of the usual PGA Tour course or the average PGA Tour course. I don't know how I feel with proximity, because I think these greens are going to be pretty difficult. So I think I just want to focus on greens, I think, would be the best way to go about it. Having said that, I still think it's going to be the 200 plus proximity that is the most important, considering there are 3 very long par 4s that measure over 500 yards. There are 3 long par 4s from 450 to 5. You also have a couple of par 5s that might be attackable. I think it's the 200 plus if there's a specific range. I'm just not confident I'm going to put it in the mixed condition model. So there's a look at the data from the past 11 U.S. Opens, and it's very incomplete. So that's why I don't want to put a whole lot of emphasis into it. But we need something to look at heading into looking at the field this week, and who and what metrics and statistics we want to focus on, and who are best at those particular metrics. We're going to go ahead and move on over to Fantasy National. I'm sure we'll come back to Microsoft Excel towards the end of the show, but let's go to let's go to Fantasy National and look at several of these metrics in a lot of different ways, knowing what we just saw in Microsoft Excel from the limited set of data we have, what we think is going to be the most important. Starting with the strokes gained page view. Look, it's the U.S. Open. It's going to be difficult. I can bring up the past course conditions, but difficult. You've had 1 round of average the past 6 years. There's another 1 round of average. It is always difficult. It's always going to be difficult. The USGA really pushes the limit of what's acceptable on golf courses, in my opinion. But when we look at performance, total performance on or in rounds that are difficult, and we will let's go back to let's just keep it consistent from all other parts this year. We'll go back to 2021. Your top performers, total performers, when a round has been difficult since the beginning of 2021, Scottie Scheffler, Rory, Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland, Jon Rahm, Jordan Spieth, Matt Fitzpatrick, Xander, Cam Smith, and Shane Lowry. Another thing we can look at in terms of total performance, this course is long. It's a par 70 that's right at 7,400 yards, so it's going to play very, very long. So your top performers on long courses since the beginning of 2021. Jon Rahm, Xander, Scottie Scheffler, Corey Connors, Rory, Colin Morikawa, Sam Stevens, Sung Jae, Chris Kirk, Jordan Spieth, and Keegan Bradley. All I'm going to do in terms of total performance, because I really want to dig into some of these specific metrics, we'll take a look at off the tee. Let's take a look at off the tee when it's difficult. Again, it's the U.S. Open. It's always going to be difficult. Good evening, Joanne. Thanks for jumping in chat. Hopefully you had a successful Canadian Open and are ready to perform well for the 3rd major of the year, the U.S. Open. Glad to see you in chat. Who are you liking early on this week? What kind of statistics and metrics, what kind of player do you think has the advantage here at LACC? But good to see you in chat. So we'll take a look at off the tee when it's difficult. Those players, your top off the tee players, when it's difficult: Patrick Cantlay, Victor Hovland, Luke List, Cam Young, Bryson, Keith Mitchell, Joaquin Neiman, Rory, Matt Fitzpatrick, and Corey Connors. I don't know if I want to look at off the tee when fairways are difficult to hit, because as you speculated, Bruce, I mean, it's kind of conjecture. You've heard that the fairways are going to be easy to hit. I've heard the opposite. Who really knows until Thursday? Came in fourth in one concert. Well, congratulations. Very good. You join a long list of members of the community who performed very, very well at the Canadian Open. So congratulations to you. I myself had a positive ROI for seemingly the first time in a long while, building some momentum, and hopefully we'll continue that going this week for the U.S. Open. I know last week you mentioned that you were really high on Rose and Lowry. Lowry did not perform well, and I knew I was off of him. Rose fell apart on Sunday, but he had played very well leading into Sunday. But C.T. Pan, Nate Lashley, Mark Hubbard, these players that I was really, really high on performed very, very well. So glad to hear that you were successful in your endeavor. Let's see. Let's go ahead and move on to approach. I think it's going to be the more important of the ball striking. So we'll take a look at strokes gained approach when it's difficult. Your top players in that regard: Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, Rory, John Rahm, Xander, Victor Hovland, Max Homa, Emiliano Grillo, Tom Hoge, Hideki, Charlie Hoffman, and Hank Lebioda. Your top strokes gained approach players when it's difficult. So there's two very, very interesting names towards the bottom part of this bottom 10, or the bottom part of the top 10 for strokes gained approach when it's difficult. Hoffman and Lebioda. We talked a little bit about Hoffman last night. He's had very good performances historically in U.S. Opens. So perhaps somebody to think about. As you can see his price at $6,800, maybe somebody you might want to think about at the bottom end of your player pool of your rosters. The one consistent is the importance of the long approach play. Yeah, I can see that being a really big factor, and that's why I think if anything in terms of proximity, I would want to look at 200 plus, and we'll definitely do that when we get to the proximity page. There's a look at strokes gained approach. Again, don't really feel like I want to look at strokes gained approach on long courses. Of course, nothing to do with Architect. So let's go ahead and move to around the green. And this is going to be, like we talked about in the Excel portion, we talked about heavily for the Memorial. Around the green is just going to be a big deal. And we looked at it a lot of different ways. We'll start with around the green when it's difficult. I'm going to do around the green in long rough. This rough is going to be long, quite clearly. But your top around the green players when around is difficult, back to 2021, Tommy Fleetwood, Chris Kirk, Scotty Scheffler, Matt Kuchar, Tony Finau, Jordan Spieth, Patrick Reed, Ricky Fowler, Jason Day, and Shane Lowry. Your top around the green players in long rough since 2021. Those players are Tommy Fleetwood, so he's number one in both instances. Chris Kirk in the top 3 or 4 in both now. Patrick Reed, Scotty Scheffler, Jordan Spieth, Tony Finau, Matt Kuchar, Cameron Young, Siwoo Kim, and Kevin Streelman. So a decent little overlap here in terms of around the green, whether it's difficult or it's long rough. Tommy Fleetwood number 1 in both cases. Chris Kirk's very high in both cases. I believe Spieth was up there in both. I think Finau might have been up there in both, maybe? I can't remember. But there you go. There's a look at your top around the green players to look at this week, and it's going to have pretty significant weight in my mixed condition model from what we saw in Microsoft Excel. And then finally, let's take a look at some. I want to look at only Lightning, but I don't know if there's going to be enough rounds. My guess is the majority of the rounds, 3 of the 4 rounds, if not all 4, will play Lightning. That would be my guess. But you see, even all the way back to 2021, we really only have the Masters and the Memorial. The 3M in 2022 did play Lightning, but it's not a lot of rounds for these players. But if we look at Fast, we're bringing in a whole lot of other courses and greens, even though they are bent. So, I mean, you know, the Zozo, which is over in Japan. Rocket Mortgage also has POA with it. Charles Schwab is true bent. CJ Cup, some of these I just don't like how or where it brings in some of these courses. I'm going to look at Lightning only, and I could be a little bit off in that regard. I don't want to lead you astray, but I truly do feel that these greens are going to be set at lightning speed. So your top lightning speed bent grass putters since the beginning of 2019. That's as far back as I go when I collect historical data anyway. So your top putters on lightning bent greens: Andrew Putnam, Denny McCarthy, Martin Keimer, a former U.S. Open champ, Bryson DeChambeau, a former U.S. Open champ, Harris English, Patrick Reed, Justin Rose, former U.S. Open champ, Taylor Montgomery, Sepp Straka, and Ryan Armour. If you are so inclined to bring in fast and lightning bent greens, I will keep the same time frame. It's just a whole lot of rounds. Are on fast and lightning bent greens: Denny McCarthy, Harris English, Patrick Cantlay, Bryson, Alex Noren, Andrew Putnam, Justin Rose, Mackenzie Hughes, Jordan Spieth, and Rory. So quite a few same names here. Of course, Denny McCarthy, an all-world putter, Harris English, Bryson, Andrew Putnam, Justin Rose. So again, a whole lot of overlap here, but you do get some new names. Patrick Cantlay is very, very good on fast bent greens, and bent is his preferred surface, but perhaps he has not been the best on lightning speed greens. Rose and Fleetwood again this week. Okay. I don't hate it. Again, I haven't done too much in terms of rankings and all that. That's why I like doing the intense data dive. But very logical players to gravitate towards. I do worry, at least early on a Monday evening, that those players might be pretty popular, especially considering their pricing. But two good choices. Thinking about early on in the week for sure. So I'm still leaning towards lightning only, but I'd be curious to hear from the community and you all. Do you think these are going to be lightning only? Do you think it's best to look at fast and lightning? Do you think they're going to be fast and not play to lightning speed? This is the U.S. Open. That's why I think they're going to play to lightning. But what I would be interested to hear your all's take. So that's going to do it for the strokes gained page view. We looked at several things in here. Let's go ahead and start moving on into some. If I could talk, I can't talk. Some specific data. Not liking the 8K range this week. I haven't really looked too much at it. Hatton, I've been leaning towards Hatton, Finau, Thomas, Hideki, Lowry's generally pretty good when it's difficult. Sungjae, DJ, Sam Burns, J-Day, Cameron Young. I mean, it's hard to say just because, I mean, this is the elite of the elite. So you look at Justin Thomas being 8,700, there's generally no way he's ever in the 8Ks. I do like Hatton. I do like what I have seen from him in recent form. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how the rankings shake out come Wednesday. I do like Hatton, though. All right, so looking into scoring, there's really only a couple of ways or a couple of things we're going to look at, and I've mentioned it several times. I like to combine a scoring metric like birdies, bogeys, all that with a scoring filter. This is the U.S. Open. It's going to be difficult. So, your top bogey avoiders when a round has been difficult since the beginning of 2021. Those players are Scotty Scheffler, Shane Lowry, Patrick Cantlay, Colin Morikawa, Matt Fitzpatrick, Xander, Tommy Fleetwood, Rory, Victor Hovland, Hideki, and Sungjae. Also, we'll take a look at doubles. Your top double bogey avoiders when a round is difficult. Rory, Jordan Spieth, Jon Rahm, Colin Morikawa, Chris Kirk, Denny McCarthy, Keegan, Russell Henley, Siwoo Kim, and Patrick Reed. Only because we talk about it sometimes in reference to double bogeys. I do want to see what some of these numbers are in double bogey avoidance. See, again, it's 1.9. It doesn't, at least from last year's U.S. Open at the Country Club in Brookline, wasn't a spectacularly high number. You can see just the sheer amount of bogey avoidance here. 11.1 from Hideki, 8.1. Surprisingly enough, the winner was more birdies gained. I think that's an outlier. Take a look at 2021 real quick. Again, I'm just wanting to look at this double bogey avoidance number. All right, so you got some 2.5s up here from Torrey Pines. Or excuse me, this is Winged Foot. Okay, that's a little bit more convincing to see. 2019 at Pebble. I'd have to go and look for Jon Rahm's Torrey Pines. For some reason, it's thrown out in Fantasy National in terms of order. See, only just a 1.7, so not sure about the double bogey avoidance. I do know that bogey avoidance is going to be a focal point of my mixed condition model. So there are your top bogey avoiders when a round is difficult. Just again, very quickly: Scheffler, Lowry, Colin Morikawa, Cantlay, Fitzpatrick, Xander, Fleetwood, Rory, Victor Hovland, Hideki, and Sungjae. So don't be surprised if these players are a little bit higher than what you might think come Wednesday night, because I know this will be a pretty big focal point in my mixed condition model. Pars are going to be great scores this week, so I really want to see who avoids bogeys. All right, moving into the driving statistics. We'll take a look at a few different ways. Your top driving distance players when a round is difficult. Rory, Bryson, Cam Young, Wyndham Clark, Luke List, Gary Woodland, Joaquin Niemann, Jon Rahm, Minwoo Lee, and Scotty Scheffler. Now, Jon Rahm and Scotty Scheffler are the only ones that are good with in terms of fairways and having distance. Your top fairways gained players, they are Tom Kim is really the only one in the top 10 that has a respectable amount of distance while still hitting fairways when it's difficult. Some of these holes might lead to a layup off the tee, but we can look at some driving on long courses, especially for the big boy par fours, as they say, the 450 plus par fours and the drivable par four. You know, somebody like Brendan Todd won't be able to drive that green, but you know, Rory, Bryson, they might be able to if they choose to. So on long courses, your top driving distance players are there. Really, the only one is Jon Rahm in terms of fairways as well on long courses. An interesting name here just outside the top 10, Brent Grant. 12th in distance, 23rd in fairways on long courses. Something to perhaps keep an eye on or think about. And in terms of fairways, again, only Tom Kim, the only top 10 fairway game player with any modicum of distance. Let's see. We're going to take that off. Again, I am pretty darn confident that the greens in regulation are going to be a pretty big deal. So your top greens in regulation gained players when a round is difficult: Scotty Scheffler, Jon Rahm, Colin Morikawa, Corey Connors, Patrick Cantlay, Xander, Shane Lowry, Rory, Luke List, and Victor Hovland. Okay. We can take a look at scrambling, but I'm starting to really like the around the green and long rough combination if I'm wanting to look at scrambling type statistics. But your top scramblers when a round's been difficult: Denny McCarthy, Sung Jae, Tommy Fleetwood, Patrick Reed, Andrew Putnam, Brian Harman, Taylor Montgomery, Patrick Cantlay, Jason Day, and Matt Kuchar. Yeah, I think that'll probably do it for scrambling. Don't think I want to look at scrambling on long courses. We can look at sand saves, I suppose. Sand saves and difficult, although I'm pretty confident I'm not going to have sand saves in my mixed condition model. If you are wanting to factor in some sand saves, your top players with sand saves: Brian Harman, Patrick Reed, Andrew Putnam, Matt Kuchar, Justin Thomas, Tommy Fleetwood, Denny McCarthy, Sebastian Munoz, Wyndham Clark, and Paul Haley. So a couple of very interesting names here. Haley, Munoz, first time we've probably mentioned him tonight. Andrew Putnam at 6,800 has popped on a few of these metrics. So interesting stuff there. But I'm going to be focused on the greens in the driving and accuracy tab. All right. Let's look at proximity. And I think you're correct, Bruce, that the long irons are probably going to be the focal point of any of the proximities. Don't know if I'm going to have any of that in the mixed condition model, but I'm going to look at total procs and 200 plus. Your total, or your best total proximity players from this calendar year, because I'm not going to do any filters. Your top total procs players: Victor Hovland, Jon Rahm, Ryan Armour, Russell Henley, Justin Rose, Tony Finau, Tom Hoge, Michael Kim, Colin Morikawa, and Scotty Scheffler. Your top 200 plus proximity players this calendar year: Rahm, Tom Hoge, Tom Kim, Justin Rose, Gary Woodland, Victor Hovland, Tony Finau, Charlie Hoffman, Shane Lowry, and Scotty Scheffler. So there are the players you want to focus on if you're going to be using some proximity in your calculations, particularly the long proximities. We'll move to par 3s, 4s, and 5s, and then we'll round out the show a little bit more in Microsoft Excel. Your top par 3 performers: Jon Rahm, Ricky Fowler, Sam Burns, Max Homa, Scotty Scheffler, Siwoo Kim, Adam Schenk, Denny McCarthy, Emiliano Grillo, and Justin Rose. I do think it's going to be advantageous or worth your while to look at the 225 plus par 3s, considering there are 3 of them. on the scorecard, including 2 that are 280 plus this week. So your top 225 plus long par 3 players: Shane Lowry, Joel Damon, Siwoo Kim, Cam Young, Adam Schenk, Jon Rahm, Hideki, Justin Suh, Nick Hardy, and Xander. So I'm not sure if I'm going to have 225 plus in the mixed condition model. I'm obviously going to have a little bit of par 3s and par 5s. If I do have a range, I'm going to be looking at the 225 plus. There's a look at those players. Move to par 4s. Again, this is going to be another heavy emphasis this week. Your top par 4 performers this calendar year: Scotty Scheffler, Tyrrell Hatton, Patrick Cantlay, Jon Rahm, Jason Day, Xander, Victor Hovland, Max Homa, Tony Finau, and Nick Taylor. I do want to look at the 0 to 350. As I mentioned last night, these drivable par 4s could set up similarly to the long par 3s this week. So I think there's a little bit of overlap here that I think it might be worth looking at the 0 to 350, even though there's only one par 4 in this range at LACC. I think this is a good combination with the long par 3s. So your top par 4 performers or drivable par 4 performers: Tommy Fleetwood, Taylor Moore, Patrick Cantlay, Scotty Scheffler, Xander, Carson Young, Aaron Wise, Tyrrell Hatton, Bryson, Sam Burns, and Lucas Herbert. And then the long par 4s, 450 to 5 and 500 plus. From 450 to 5, we have Scotty Scheffler, Rose, Hovland, Nick Taylor, Patrick Cantlay, Siwoo, Ryan Fox, first time we've said him tonight. Max Homa, might be the first time we've said him tonight. Xander and Wyndham Clark. And then the 500 plus par 4s, Tyrrell Hatton, Hayden Buckley, first time we've said him tonight. Luke List, Tommy Fleetwood, Victor, Brooks, Joel Damon, Keegan Bradley, Patrick Rogers, and Xander. So there's your top long par 4 performers. And then finally, par 5s, no specific range I'm going to focus on. So your top total par 5 performers: Jon Rahm, Patrick Cantlay, Scotty Scheffler, Wyndham Clark, Xander, Jordan Spieth, Matt Kuchar, Tommy Fleetwood, Dylan Wu, first time we've said him, and Sung Jae. All right, there's a look at the particular players that are the best at the metrics and statistics that historically have played well at U.S. Opens and what we think is going to play well this week at LACC. I'm going to bring us back to the U.S. Open or early look file, however you want to consider it. I'll bring that up here, but I also want to bring up my PGA rankings, since it was last month. Probably a similar type of setup that we're thinking about. I'm not going to sort it or anything. I just kind of want to get a gauge and see what I did for it. So this was a little bit different. This was my attempt to incorporate the live players. It did okay, I suppose. You can see over here, of course, I was very high on Abraham Ancer. That didn't work out. Steele didn't work out. I mean, I guess it did okay. It served a little bit of a purpose, I suppose. Everything was done difficult to par, so I don't know if I'm going to replicate that this week for the U.S. Open. It would make sense. Just don't know how I'm going to approach that yet. 20% par 4s, 15% in approach, 15% bogeys avoided, so looking like a lot of the same stuff. I did have 10% off the tee. If I recall, I believe off the tee was more important from the PGA. So I'm not sure if I'm going to have too much in off the tee. 10% in greens. I had 10% in par 3s. I do believe this was a par 70. 5% on just bent. Okay. I didn't put fast and lightning. Interesting. All right. I did have 5% distance, 5% scrambling, and 5% total procs. Okay. But the main heavy emphasis was par fours, approaches, and bogeys. So I did want to bring that up just to give myself a reminder of what I did for the previous major. So let me put that off to the side. We're going to round out the show with a little bit of looking at historical performances at U.S. Opens. Again, as I mentioned, take this a little bit with some grain of salt. I mean, we don't have the strokes gained data even from last year's U.S. Open. We don't have strokes gained for a lot of the U.S. Opens. More so just looking at who has played U.S. Opens well, and the birdies versus the bogeys, I think, is probably going to be where the majority of this is at. Maybe proximities. So I'm going to filter out anybody who's played it probably just once. Oh shoot, I wanted the other way around. Yeah. So you can see Xander, he's played in 6 U.S. Opens. His an average finish of 7th. In fact, he has never finished outside the top 15 in his career at a U.S. Open. So you'd have to figure he's going to be a very popular play for good reason. You see he has always played pretty darn well. Brooks, Colin Morikawa, Hideki is 9 for 10. Patrick Reed's 8 for 9. Patrick Cantlay is 6 for 6. Although nothing, he either has no high-end finishes or perhaps has some clunkers of made cuts, but he is still 6 for 6. Matt Fitzpatrick, your defending champion. Harris English, 7 for 7 in the past 11 years at the U.S. Open. Okay, we saw Andrew Putnam pop a few times, 2 for 2. Not a whole lot of track record, but he's hit irons fairly well, and he's putt amazing at U.S. Opens. Something to think about. Patrick Rogers, 4 for 4. Charlie Hoffman, 5 for 6. Denny McCarthy, 2 for 3, but you can see we don't have any of his data. So, all right, there's a look at some of the players that have just overall, results-wise have played well. Let's take a look at some of these greens. Say fairways, distance, greens. Again, Brooks, you can see heavy emphasis in greens and regulation. Xander, much the same. The highest number, actually, is Victor. Okay, makes some sense. Ball striker. You can see his emphasis has been on fairways as opposed to distance, but he's also been very good at greens and regulation. Sungjae's been more in the fairways and greens, who's played it semi-okay, I suppose. But Martin Keimer, who's played pretty darn well in U.S. Opens, to be fair to Martin Keimer, he's been more so in the distance. Of the players, we'll do top 40. Of the players who have averaged a top 40 in their career, or at least going back to 2012, at the U.S. Open, this isn't a very high number. It's only a 13. So, I don't know. Fairways doesn't look like it's a very high number either. Yeah, it's a 0.5. Whereas the greens, this looks like a decently 1.7. Okay. I think where we're going to gain the most here, let's look at scoring very quickly. Again, for the players that have averaged top 40. It's a 2.1 in birdies gained, 2.4 in bogeys. It's interesting to see Xander has preferred the birdies. Brooks Koepka and Colin Morikawa have done more and so in the birdies. Okay. Interesting to see. In fact, most of these players seemingly are doing more so in the birdies gained. Okay. I still think it's going to be bogeys avoided, but it's interesting to see that set of data and how more than just one or two of the players are more adept at gaining birdies than they are avoiding bogeys at U.S. Opens. Last thing for the evening, we'll take a look at proximity, at least in terms of historical performance. at a U.S. Open. Again, reminder, take this a little bit with a grain of salt. We only have 4 years of proximity data. But in those 4 years, Brooks has been very good at total procs. Your top 200 plus players, Andrew Putnam, Victor, Justin Rose has been good from 200 plus. Charlie Hoffman's been good at 200 plus at U.S. Opens. Matt Fitzpatrick, 200 plus. So there you go. All right. That's going to do it for the Data Dive show this evening. I'll bring back everybody into the field, or everybody that's in the field, even if they've only played once. I'll show you a little bit of the research that I did regarding the previous winners. I don't want to spend too much time because I put this on social media, but one of the big things that you need to really pay attention to, especially if you're going to be wagering outrights or if you're in office pools and picking winners, every single winner of the U.S. Open going back to 2012 at least made the cut in the previous year U.S. Open. So not even just the previous one they played, it was last year's U.S. Open. So immediately from the start, narrow down your search for winners and in your office pools or whatnot to the players who made the cut at the country club last year. That's a very good way to start. Now you do see there have been mixed results. I mean, Matt Fitzpatrick was 55th and then won. Dustin Johnson was second and then won. So there's a good wide variety there, but they at least made the cut in the previous year's U.S. Open. And the other thing I'll show you, other than Webb Simpson, in 2012, they're coming to the U.S. Open off of a cut made of some kind. 10th, 8th, 52nd, 8th, 3rd, 5th, 37th. They are coming off of a cut made of some kind. Other than Webb Simpson. He's a pretty drastic outlier of these 11 players. So there's a good way to start your, look at some winners and your office pools and whatnot. But if you want to see the full explanation and research around everything that I gathered today, make sure to go take a look over on social media. Put that both on Twitter and Instagram. That is going to do it for the Data Dive show this evening. Bruce and Joanne, thanks for jumping in chat. Always appreciated that you all join and interact. I love it. We'll see come Thursday how the course plays. Bruce, you've heard that the fairways will be easy to hit. I've heard the opposite. Joanne, we'll see where Rose and Fleetwood finish up in my rankings when I work on those starting tomorrow. But I'm looking forward to it. I've built a month of some momentum coming off my first positive ROI in seemingly a while. I'm looking forward to what I'm hoping is going to be a very successful U.S. Open. So thanks to you two for jumping in chat, and thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do, being able to talk in-depth sports statistics and trying to win a little bit of money in the process. And the community has been very, very successful lately, going back the past 3 or 4 weeks or so. So love to hear it, and we're hoping to continue that momentum, build on it, and have even more success for the U.S. Open this week. For all the wagers you've made so far this week for the U.S. Open, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the U.S. Open, and until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.